Have you ever wondered where food comes from? A picture of a farmer planting seeds might come to mind. However, some seeds are genetically altered in a laboratory before being planted. These seeds are called genetically modified organisms and produce genetically modified foods. GMOs are foods produced from organisms that have had specific changes introduced into their DNA using the methods of genetic engineering. These techniques allow for the introduction of new traits as well as a far greater control over a food's genetic structure. So when did this all start? Commercial sales of genetically modified crops began in 1994 when the company Calgene first marketed its Flavor Saver delayed ripening tomato. Today, GMO crops range from 60 to 90% of the crops that are commercially produced. Since 1994, over 81 GMO foods have been approved in Canada, including canola, corn, lentils, potatoes, rice, soybeans, squash, tomatoes, and wheat. More than 250 million hectares of GM crops are planted annually in more than 20 countries and by more than 10 million farmers. The US grows up to 50% of all the GM crops in the world. Canada accounts for about 6% of the world's production. GM livestock have also been experimentally developed, although as of today, none are on the market. This is due to complications with infertility and ethical concerns. So what are the pros of GMOs and what can they do for us? Some of the benefits include crops that grow well even when they have been sprayed with pesticides, crops with less disease caused by insects or viruses, resistant to weather like frost or drought. They ripen slower and last longer during shipping, bruise less easily, improves crop yield, and there can be a higher percent of a certain vitamin in the food. But although there appears to be many benefits, there are also many negative aspects of producing GMOs. There is a lot of controversy over the use and production of GMOs, especially in North America. Some risks include potential health concerns because many people think GM foods have not been adequately tested, cross-contamination with non-GM crops. Insects could also become pesticide resistant, making them difficult to control in the near future, and the variety of foods that the world produces may be lowered due to GM crops. This is because farmers may choose to plant only a few types of GM crops since they may produce larger amounts of food. Many studies have been done to prove the negative effects of GMOs. An example is a study done at Brown University. So according to Brown, GM foods can present significant allergy risks to people. Genetic modifications often mixes or adds proteins that weren't indigenous to the original plant, causing new allergic reactions in the human body. As well, the GM protein that makes Roundup Ready soy resistant to the herb does not have a history of safe use in humans and may be an allergen. In fact, sections of its amino acid are identical to known allergens. Research on GM foods include studies by the Food and Agricultural Organization and the World Health Organization has validated that generally GM food is safe. There's also controversy over labeling. GM foods do not have to be labeled in Canada. Labeling of GM foods is very difficult. This is because a GM food like corn can be used as an ingredient in many other foods such as cereal, yogurt, and canned soup. All of these foods would need to be labeled as having genetically modified ingredients. As a consumer, you will not likely know if the food you buy have been genetically modified. In other parts of the world like Europe, it is mandatory to label GM foods. So how is the food actually genetically modified? Let's say you wanted to create an insect-resistant tomato plant. There are three main components that are required: the gene you want to transfer, the organism you want to put it into, and a vector to carry the gene into the target species. First, you need to find the desired gene in an organism's genome. Once found, it can then be cut out and transferred by a vector to the target plant and pasted into its genome. To get the desired trait into the target species, you need a gene gun, which acts similar to a real gun and fires the vectors into the plant's cells. The genes are then incorporated into the plant genome and only the cell that have incorporated the vector will grow. Once the new gene has been introduced, the plant can be bred to create a new strain that passes the gene from generation to generation. A common example of genetic engineering is the insertion of Bacillus thuringiensis genes into corn to make Bt corn. Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterium that naturally produces a protein that is lethal to insect larvae. By transferring the genes that encode this protein into corn, scientists have created a type of corn that produces its own pesticide, making it resistant to insects. In conclusion, there are both pros and cons to eating and engineering GMOs. Ultimately, it is up to the consumer to make an informed decision as to whether GMOs are right for them.